Hello everyone, Prime here, and today we're going to be talking about the Baron Samedi and the Pele little leaks, I suppose, or sneak peeks, whatever you want to call them, that we received on Twitter, Reddit, I suppose YouTube, not too sure, but we saw a little early as to what Hi-Rez is working on as far as their appearance go. Now we're going to be talking about Baron Samedi first, and just a little brush up on voodoo mythology, or at least what voodoo mythology has to say about Baron Samedi. Top hat, skull face, classy suit, a nice cigar, some dark shades, and a cane that he might use to help him dance. Now he's usually fairly tall, perhaps a bit thin, but handsome. He likes his rum. He's fairly outspoken, and he pretty much does whatever he wants, whenever he wants. His job typically centers around death and the afterlife, so that's why he's got in his concept art, that dark appearance, besides, of course, the other things I just mentioned about his appearance. And when you stack it up against his lore, Baron Samedi almost fits the descriptions perfectly. It's very nice to see that throwback to the lore, which is why there's just not that much to say about his appearance. Nice job, Hi-Rez, very lore-fitting, I approve. When we get to Pele here, and her appearance as far as her lore and mythology are concerned, it's actually it doesn't bother me too much. And see, in her mythology, she's like a wild, free spirit. She does pretty much whatever she wants in some stories. In other stories, she sort of has to work around certain other beings that she knows, and specifically one of her sisters. She has to work around her sister that is essentially trying to end her. But when she can be, she's proven to be violent, very dangerous, and gets jealous very easily, so she kind of lets her emotions guide her in life. And her appearance makes her seem a lot like an assassin, which I suppose fits more with the stories in which her sister is the one that she's fleeing from, or she's moving across the country thanks to her sister, working around her sister in order to complete her task. Assassins, that archetype, working in the shadows, going after the target secretly, not being too flamboyant, too obvious as to, revealing your presence to a bunch of people, your target specifically, things like that. So I can kind of see, from a lore perspective, why going the assassin route makes sense, but from what the core of her character seems to be, the mage approach seems like it could make more sense. And this is just concept art. Even for Baron Samedi, it is just concept art. Both of them could be radically different from what we actually see on their final releases. But considering the fact that Hi-Rez has chosen to show this to us now, assuming that Hi-Rez has chosen to show this to us, and this isn't just an unwanted leak on Hi-Rez's part, we're probably going to see something very similar to this in terms of their final designs. I think on the data mining posts, Pele is pretty much confirmed to be physical. Of course, nothing is 100% confirmed, but usually when gods are said to be physical, usually they turn out to be a physical god. I don't think that Pele's not going to be assassin. The last time we got an assassin was, Daji? That was ages ago, so we definitely are due for an assassin. There are other problems that I have with Pele's appearance, though. See, she has high heels, and the whole high heels for goddesses, I get that goddesses are supposed to be the apex of physical appearance and beauty, and all of that stuff. Fighting in high heels is something that's always bothered me about Smite, and I get it comes up in other games probably as well, and I get it, these are perfect beings, so if anyone's capable of fighting in high heels, it would be goddesses, right? If a guardian, a frontline fighter like Athena, wasn't wearing high heels, and there wasn't that element of fantasy, because I get it, Smite is somewhat a fantasy title. Fighting in high heels is so impractical. I've heard that it's very difficult to move whilst wearing high heels, because you're not walking how the body was created to move. You're walking in a very specific way for a very specific reason. A reason that doesn't make too much sense in Smite, because yes, there are a lot of gods that exist in Smite, but there's a good number of goddesses that exist as well. So the idea that you could be trying to appeal to a sort of, perhaps the goddesses are wearing heels to distract their opponents? Well, if you're going to see goddesses a lot on the field anyway, that doesn't always pan out too well. Is it really worth doing? Even if a lot of the goddesses are also wearing high heels, for those that aren't, there's just no point whatsoever. And also, for certain gods, they don't even care anyways. Of course, in mythology, a lot of the gods would care, but match after match, it doesn't make a difference. You still get smacked with all the skills as all the other gods and goddesses who aren't wearing heels do, so doesn't really seem to work out too well for the goddesses. Speaking from a lore within the game standpoint on heals. And also, I don't know how heals work, I'm not an expert on this sort of thing, but surely if you're fighting in heals, they're more likely to break. It's not as if the actual tip, the shaft part, shall we say, of the heel is very sturdy, right? It doesn't look sturdy, it looks thin and very breakable. So if Neith is doing all those backflips and all of that, surely eventually the heel's gonna break, because at least I think Athena's heel looks sort of thick, you know, thicker than at least Neith's. So what do people do if their heels ever break? If heels, because I'm sure heels break, right? What do people do if you're in a combat scenario as a goddess, your heel breaks? What do? Do you quickly take off your shoe, take off your other shoe, and then fight barefoot like a Wheelix would? Pele's boot comes up to, you know, almost her knee, right? Or a good part of her lower leg. So can you even take that off fairly quickly in a practical or a speedy sort of way in the middle of combat? You know, dropping your weapons, making you vulnerable because you have no weapons in your hand. Taking off your boots, making you more vulnerable because you're off of your feet probably. Or even if you're not on your feet, you're still distracted. Heels, I get it. They don't affect gameplay having heels, except maybe, you know, whatever sound effect the goddess will make when she moves. It's purely cosmetic, still just a minor nitpick that I have for Smite. Added point here that kind of baffles me now that I think about it as well. She's supposed to be an assassin. If she's going to be an assassin, she's holding daggers. I know Chernobog had a concept where he was holding daggers in like some sort of reverse grip. Doesn't matter because he didn't use daggers anyways. Point is, she's an assassin, right? She wants to conceal her movements as much as possible. Why would she wear something that would bring a lot of attention to her? Heels like to clickety-clack against the ground when you hear people using them, right? Why would she want that if she's following this assassin archetype? That doesn't make too much sense to me. I suppose I'm not really focusing on the lore at this point, but I get for Smite, assassin does not necessarily mean your traditional assassin. You only need to look at Thor and Fenrir to realize that, yeah, not every assassin has to follow the stealthy, sneaky, pounce on opponent when at the opportune moment. But those assassins don't even look like traditional assassins necessarily anyway. Fenrir, I guess assassin was the only class he could possibly work with necessarily. I mean, you could also fit him into the warrior, but, you know, with Fenrir, he doesn't necessarily look like he'd fit the other archetypes fairly well anyways, other than assassin, I suppose. Thor looks like he'd fit more into the warrior category, but, you know, if Hi-Rez wants to change around every single class just because it doesn't necessarily look like it fits into every single class, well, that would make things fairly. Pele looks like more of an assassin than some of the other assassins, is my point. Except when you factor in the heels. Now, you could argue that the heels are some sort of throwback to how she fits into mythology, how she acted, her personality, all of that from Polynesian or Hawaiian mythology. But then, if that's the case, why mix appearances like that? Why not just make her a mage and not an assassin? Okay, she's not confirmed to be an assassin by Hi-Rez, but again, probably going to be an assassin. And like, I want an assassin, I'm not saying an assassin's a bad thing. Even a lot of the depictions you find of her online, she doesn't get that I'm going to fight from the shadows in a very specific, calculated way. It's that if I am going to fight you, I'm going to be upfront about it. I'm going to be directly there. You usually see her, necessarily her being depicted as what she would be from, you know, original Haitian mythology or Polynesian mythology. But even still, most of the artists seem to almost, without saying, like an unspoken rule, that she's either wearing, you know, volcanoes as some sort of dress, or she's wearing some sort of dress of some kind, not the sort of the wraps that we see around her and design, or the design that she has now. Because she's an assassin, and assassins are pretty much my favorite class, I can overlook this. This doesn't bother me too much. And again, this was supposed to be a short video, no longer than 5 or so minutes. I have been talking for longer than I expected, so maybe this bothers me more than I know. And you've got one design, Baron Samedi, where they are staying fairly true to the lore, it seems, and another one where they're being more creative. You know, I suppose it's a balancing thing there. You know, you're satisfying some audiences on one aspect, one god, and you're satisfying another, I suppose, in another way. So if you look at it like that way, you know, like half and half. I know that, of course, to the people who are fans of Pele, that's like, okay, whatever. You're not satisfying me, right? But I suppose it is what it is. Random question to distract us from the skins and the leaks and all of that, as we mentioned it in the video. Assuming that Fenrir wasn't an assassin, you couldn't make him assassin, what class would you make him? He doesn't necessarily have to follow the appearance that Hyros has given him. He doesn't have to have the pseudo-werewolf look. He could have the regular wolf look, or your own creative look. There's also an option to make him no class, but still a part of the game somehow. So, assuming that's the case, how would you fit Fenrir into the game? Where would you put him? It'd be interesting to see what you guys come up with for that. But those were just my thoughts on the leaks that we got for Baron Samedi and Pele. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like, and if you want to see more content just like this, go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell. That's pretty much the best thing you can do for the channel right now, so yeah. And until the next video, have a very good day. I've been Prime, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.